It's November 9th, 1992. We're here with lots of our family, Bobby, me, Grandpa Crockett, Grandma Crockett, and Granny Mack, and our whole family. We're asking Granny Mack questions about her life. Mark and Ann Crockett are going to read the questions. When was your first time you drove a car?
When I was in high school, my boyfriend and two others in the whole town had a car, and it was the old Ford. We had to crank it to make it start, and my boyfriend had the car.
Who was your boyfriend?
My boyfriend was Floyd M. Mack, who I later married after many years.
Not too many.
Not enough.
If you were in high school when you met him.
No, I met him when we were children, just children. But he was always my boyfriend. We were just little kids, 8 and 9 years old. And his family was rich in comparison to the rest of us. They had everything. They had the first car that was in the first telephone that was ever had in the whole area. So he drove his car to school, high school, and he'd hand me the key in the morning, and I could take it and go anywhere I wanted to. He had taught me to drive it, but he hadn't taught me to reverse. And so I wanted to go to this certain place, and I knew I didn't have room to turn around. So I went real slow because I wanted to go to that place. And I did hit the tree, but I was going slow. It didn't hurt the car, and it didn't hurt anyone. And President Kimball's sister lived right there, and she had a car. She knew how to drive it, and she came running out when I hit the tree and got in the car and taught me how to reverse. From then on, I could go anywhere I wanted.
Been going ever since.
Okay, what was your favorite thing to do as a child?
Well, I like to do everything, but I especially like to work in the field with my daddy and brothers. I had 6 brothers, but I had to do my housework so much. I had a sister, an older sister, so we did all the housework. But I would get up early and get my housework accomplished so I could go to the field and work with my brothers and father. And I'd watch my father plow the ground and plant the alfalfa, and then when it was ready to cut, then I'd go in the field and doodle the hay, that was putting it in little patches so it could dry out. And then when it was ready to be hauled, then I would go and help my brothers and father haul the hay. And that was more fun than ever, because as long as I could reach, I'd put it on the rack, the hay. And when I couldn't reach any farther, they'd boost me up on top of the hay, and I would shape it and tromp it down. They liked to have me help them, and I loved it. So that was my favorite thing was to work in the field.
Where was this?
Where was this, Mother?
This was in the Gila Valley, near Pima. we lived. Pima was the next town from us. They called it Nonesuch once, that little tiny place, and then it was Matthewsville, and then it was Fairview.
Okay. What is your favorite scripture?
My favorite scripture is 3 John, 4th verse. And let's see. It's been quite a while since I thought of it. But I have no other joy than to know and hear that my children walk in truth.
And that means your grandchildren too, doesn't it?
Yeah, oh, sure, all my children, grandchildren, and you're in my prayers all the time today. All my posterity, as I know that you're all going to choose the right, and we can all be in that celestial kingdom with our Father in heaven and with each other through the eternities.
What were your parents like? What were your parents like?
Oh, they were wonderful. Wonderful. My father spoiled me. I was the baby for quite some time, and then he was called on a mission to Texas. He was there during the Great Flood. It tells about it in the encyclopedia. And I always got my own way around my father. If I cried hard enough, he'd do anything for me.
That doesn't work anymore, kids.
I didn't want him to go and leave me. He had to go a long distance to catch the train to take him to Texas, and he had a companion that was going, and the companion and his wife was picking him up, and so we were just waiting for them to come out on the road, and I thought if I cried hard enough that he wouldn't go. And so I cried, and I'll never forget that. I cried till I fell from sheer exhaustion. I just fell flat. But it didn't work that time. He went anyway.
So, why don't you tell him what your mother did while he was on his mission?
Oh, little mother, you see, they went without purse or scrip. They didn't have any money. They weren't supposed to take any money with them. But my sweet little mother would send him money. And so she worked for different neighbors. And my sister, just older than I, would go with her. And she'd stand on the chair and wash the dishes for this lady. She worked for different mothers who needed help. And my older sister would stand on the chair and wash the dishes. And I would try to help, but I was slow. I think I was just in the way. But my father filled a full-time mission.
Okay. What is the most important historical event in your life?
Most important, what event?
What is the most important historical event in your life?
kind of hard. Can you help me read? I know when I remember one historical event is when President Kimball was the prophet, and they let the Negroes hold the priesthood.
That's a pretty good one.
That was for many, many years they couldn't. And I remember President Kimball, my son, Grant, married President Kimball's only daughter. And I always loved that. And then the other Arizona apostle, Delbert L. Stapley, married another son. This one here, your grandfather? Your grandfather married Apostle Stapley's daughter. So my two sons got the two Arizona apostles' daughters. And that made me so happy. I've never got over that.
We haven't either.
Oh,
Good answer, buddy. Next question.
Okay. What was school like?
oh, I love school. And I'll have to tell you this one. I love school. And I could read long before I went to school because I had this older brother and an older sister, and they'd bring their work home from school. And so I'd get into it, and I'd help myself. If I didn't know the word, somebody would tell me in the home, you know. So I was reading long before I went to school. So when I got old enough to go, then I made double grades because I could read. And I got put in the second grade right away, and with my sister. And then I got put in the third grade. My oldest brother was in the sixth grade, and she made double grades too. And before we knew it, we were all three in the sixth grade together. And that was fun. I loved that. Oh, I wanted to tell you, though, about this instance. I got put into the second grade, and the first grade went in the forenoon, and the second grade went in the afternoon. And that was my specialty, was spelling. I think that's, I had so many head marks because if you didn't miss a word, you could stay right at the head of your class. And so I never missed a word. So I had so many head marks that I earned the prize, which was a beautiful pencil box with all kinds of things in it. Rulers and all different kinds of pens and pencils. And on the, I'll never forget it because it was so special. It had a colored picture on the outside of the pencil box, and it was Old Mother Goose, and she was all dressed up and on that goose, and it said, "Old Mother Goose, when she wanted to wander, would ride through the air on a very fine gander." Well, I love that. And I kept that pencil box. I was going to keep it until today. But then when, I guess 40 years ago, I traveled around so much, and where I had all my keepsakes, I don't know what happened to them. Somebody, I don't know where any of my old things are because I was traveling. I went anywhere. My sister said, I don't know why your children let you go places and alone. I didn't care just so I could travel. I went to my son was working in Hawaii, and I went there, and then he was on a mission in Tahiti, and I got to go there. And then he let me go from there all by myself to New Zealand. So I was going to work in all the temples. And so I got to work in the New Zealand temple and in the Tahitian temple. My son Wayne filled a mission there. And so when they had the temple, years later, I got to go, and I worked in that temple. And then they waited for the last session in that temple, and I got to go through. They let me go through that last session. Wasn't that nice?
Yeah.
What's Mark? When was your first plane ride?
What?
When was your first plane ride?
When was your first plane ride?
When must it be?
I don't know. I don't remember. Do you remember your first plane ride?
We were called on mission in '64. You think that they
That's
got
the first time you flew overseas.
I can remember the first planes. They were a novelty. And this man was came to our little settlement in near Pima, and we got to go and watch him fly his plane, and he had to land in the plot ground. There wasn't a place to land. I think that was the first plane I saw.
So you didn't ride in that one?
No, I didn't ride it. But if he'd asked me, I would have.
Yeah.
What do you remember about your baptism?
Well, I remember it just like it was, if it was today. We, my two friends, one was a cousin and the other was my close girlfriend. Our teacher used to call us Cora Fern or Fern Cora because we were always together. And so she was baptized. To say she wanted me to go stay all night with her. Mother never did let us go and stay all night. Very few times she let us go. But my friend Fern wanted me to stay all night with her so bad. So we kept teasing. After school, she came after school. And it was getting, the sun had gone down. It was just about to get dark. Finally, Mother let me go with her. And we got started and got just a little way away. That was funny. And I saw smoke up on the mountain. And I said, oh, I can't go with you. The world's coming to an end. You can imagine how she felt after staying out that long and how I let her down. No, I wouldn't go with her.
I thought maybe you thought the Indians were coming.
Well, that's the way that my children, or my brothers and sister, would get me to do anything they wanted to. If I wasn't going to do it, they'd say, "Oh, the Indians are coming." And boy, that would scare me to death. So I'd do anything they asked me to. They'd save me from the Indians, because why? The Indians had killed some friends of my mother's. And I'd heard the story so much. So I knew that the Indians were bad. And Geronimo, you read about him in the encyclopedia. And he was on the rampage when I was a little kid. So I was really afraid of the Indians.
You didn't finish telling us about your baptism on the tank.
What?
Your baptism in the tank.
Oh, yes. The windmill would pump the water into the tank. And it was right there by the windmill. And so that was the water that they had to do the baptisms. So we were baptized, my friends and I, in belonged to a family called Borns, Borns, E-S, I guess, Borns. So my friends and I were baptized in Borns' tank. I'll never forget that.
Water pumped by a windmill.
Uh-huh.
Was it big enough for the person who baptized you to be in there too?
What?
Was it big enough for the person who baptized you to stand in there with you?
Yeah, it was quite a big square. It was not as long, maybe, as this room. It was about the size of this room, the tank.
Who baptized you, Mother?
Who baptized you?
I've forgotten. It was one of the, could have been my uncle. He was the bishop. Could have been him. I've forgotten.
Did you go to primary?
Oh, yes. I went to primary. I loved primary. And I still thank the dear Lord for my primary teachers. They were so wonderful. And we also had religion class in my day. We had religion class on Wednesday, primary on Monday, and a mutual. We had mutual at night. I can't remember what day. But we loved our organizational meetings. And my teachers, I still thank Heavenly Father for the wonderful teachers I had. And the McBrides played a big part in my life. Peter H. McBride, in those days they had polygamy, and he had the two wives. One of his wives was my primary president, and the other wife was the religion class president. And then their daughter, Laura McBride, she never married a Smith. She was my mutual teacher. And I still thank the dear Lord for those wonderful teachers.
Okay. What is the funniest thing that has happened to you?
The funniest?
Yeah.
Well, I can't remember the funniest, but I will tell you of one funny thing that happened, and it showed you what my sweet little mother was like. We brothers and sisters were having a water fight in the house. and we got really busy and doing things we should. We were even throwing water on each other right in the living room, and
Oh, Cori would like that.
that was funny. But we were having a wonderful time. Mother wasn't in the house, but she came in. And when we saw Mother at the door, we were all scared to death because we were throwing water everywhere. And my brother had just come in with a big bucket of water from outside. And Mother stepped in, and he couldn't resist pouring all that water on my sweet little mother. And that scared us to death. We thought, oh, what's going to happen now? But we were having such a big time that she laughed as hard as we did. And that water fight I'll never forget if I live to be 200. It was so much fun, and to have Mother laugh with us and enjoy it. Of course, that stopped the water fight then. It was all over, but that was the type of grandmother you had.
Okay. What are your best memories of your family?
Of my family? Oh, we all sang. We all had two voices, all six of my brothers. And my sister could play any instrument by ear. And first, we didn't even have a piano. So she started playing on the old washboard. They've never seen one of these old washboards that we used to wash. You children haven't, but it was, she could strum on that. So because we all sang, the boys all had beautiful voices. And my sister sang alto, and I sang soprano, and we were singing all the time. And so she'd strum on that washboard, and we would sing. And my mother would have us go and sing to older people. And I remember one day I was playing with my doll, and I happened to think about this old grandmother Riggs that lived way up in the bushes. They hadn't cleared the land. And I thought of her, and I thought, well, I'm going to go and sing to old grandmother Riggs. And so I left my doll and everything there. I was outside playing under the tree. I left it all there, and I ran up through the bushes and knocked on Grandma Riggs' door. And I'll never, never forget that experience. She came to the door, and I said, Grandma Riggs, I came to sing to you. She put her arms around me and hugged me. I'll never forget that hug. And thanked me over and over. And then after that, Mother would have us go sing to older people. And I remember an old bachelor that lived close to us, and I went, and we wouldn't go in his house, but we went and sang under the window, and he told a relative of mine about it. He loved it. He said if he'd had $1,000, we'd have got every bit of it that night, that day. We were sorry he didn't have $1,000.
Okay, John.
How many kids do you have?
I have 4. I wanted more, but the doctor warned me that if I wanted to rear the ones I had, I better not have any more.
Is that because of you or because he knew what your kids were like?
Oh, No, my kids have always been marvelous. But it was because of health.
How many grandkids?
Oh, I've lost track.
How many great
How many?
lots?
Lots and lots. 60
Yeah.
or something, isn't it? Or
Oh, more than that.
more than that?
Not grandchildren, maybe great
Oh, no, not. I think it's
Oh, grandchildren.
grandchildren and great grandchildren.
I was thinking great.
You were thinking of who?
Well, I was thinking of both.
20, you have 22 grandchildren.
22 grandchildren. But the last count was close to 80 or 90 of the great grands. So I think I have over 100 now. Because they're all,
Good
I gave my children a quota when they got married. I expected them all to have 6 children. Now I only missed it by 2.
I wonder which two.
We should have told the other ones to do more on their part.
We went for quality, not quantity.
Okay, well, that concludes our questions.
Well,
Yes,
thank
those
you.
are written questions. Anybody else have any other questions? What, Ann?
What were your parents' names?
My parents was James Moses, was my father, and my mother was Gustella Wilkins Larson. James Moses Larson, Gustella Wilkins Larson. My sweet little Larson grandparents were converted in Sweden, and they heard the elders, and their parents wouldn't listen to the elders. And when they joined the church, their parents disowned them. So as soon as they possibly could, they got things together, and my grandfather was cabinet maker for the King of Sweden, and so they got everything together and started for America. And they were 6 weeks on that little sailing vessel coming over from Sweden. And they got to Salt Lake. When they got to New York, the company had gone on ahead, and so they crossed the plains, but he had to make his own handcart. But he was a cabinet maker, so he made it, and when they got to Salt Lake, it was Mona, I think is where they were first. No, Santaquin, Utah. They couldn't speak English, so they thought the handcarts belonged to the church, so they took their handcarts away from them. So he had to do without. And right away, though, after they were in Utah, they were called by the prophet Brigham Young to settle Arizona. And that's how I happened to be an Arizonian. And they came to Arizona. And I never did see either one of my grandfathers. They'd passed away before I was born, but my 2 grandmothers were marvelous. And we lived in the center of the place, and one grandmother lived on one side and one on the other. And I was happy about that. The one grandmother would beg for us, the little Swedish grandmother. If we got into trouble, Mother was going to switch us. She'd say, "Oh, don't switch them this time. They won't do it anymore." But the other grandmother saw that we got our punishment. So it evened it up. But I still thank the Lord today for my whole life because it was beautiful. Grandmother on each side of us that loved us. And the one grandmother had the big house, and our house was just a little one. And if terrible rain had come and it looked like it was really going to hail and it was going to be bad, Mother would gather us all up and we'd run for Grandma Wilkins's home. I'll never forget going in. It was fun because we could visit Grandma and see the rain and feel so safe.
What was the most scariest thing that's happened to you?
What?
What was the most scariest thing that's happened to you?
The scariest.
I still don't hear.
The
What was the
scariest.
scariest thing that ever happened to you?
When you were really scared.
The only thing that would scare me was when it would come a rain and we'd turn the cows out to feed on the grass, and then we'd have to go after them. My brothers would have to go after them. And when they had to get on their horses and go after the cows, and it was raining, then I worried about my brothers, and I'd beg them to let me go with them to get the cows, and they'd let me get on the back of the saddle and go with them to. I thought I had to protect them, and we lived close to the Gila River, and when it would rain, the flood would come down all these little gulches, and the river would get so high, and oftentimes it would wash into the bank, and the bank would cave in, and I knew of different ones that had drowned because the bank caved in with them and they went down. But my brothers and the other boys, after a big storm, they liked to go and see the river, and because there was this big flood. And I was afraid that they would get on the bank and it would cave off with them. So I would go. I'd follow them and go to protect them.
Grandma, I have a story. Do you remember when we were little and we'd sleep up on your sun deck and you'd tell us stories? And we always begged for you to tell us the story of Bossy the cow. Do you remember that story? About the little girl that would wander around in the woods.
What?
The little girl that would wander around in the woods and get lost. And then the cow with the cowbell. Do you remember that story?
Faintly. I remember
You used to always teach it to us about prayer. Why we should say our prayers. You used to always tell us that story. Getting lost in the woods.
I don't remember like I used to. The specialist said I'd had a stroke. I don't know when I had it, but I remember when I quit remembering. We all forget normally, but when I quit remembering more than normal.
You can blame that on a stroke, huh?
I'll try that.
We all had our
Yeah,
strokes.
I've had quite a few recently.
But it's the truth. I can't remember since I had that side stroke. The specialist said I was having an examination. He said, "Well, you've had a stroke."
You remember our sleeping over at your house, though, don't you?
Oh yes,
Climbing up on the sun deck. That was
that's
fun.
right. And oftentimes they could come, and they would come. One time, Grant, my son, lives in Salt Lake, and he decided he was going to give his wife, Bobby, a rest. So he gathered up all the children, their children. They had 7 children, and of course they didn't have all 7 then, but he had a car full. He gathered them all up, and he came knocking on my door at late at night. I'd gone to bed, and